welcome to the Ireland on the Fly podcast about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland. George McGrath is a friend of the show and well-known fly angler based in Tipperary on the River Suir. We've spoken to George previously about the nitrification of his stretch of the river that is seen and clogged with weeds during the summer, making it all but unfishable. But now it's gotten so bad on the water, George has been forced to give up the trout rod during the summer months and go pike fishing elsewhere. So George joined us for this week's show to highlight what he sees as the lack of care and lack of action against the pollution of our rivers and waters, and asks where it will end and what is going to be done about it. George, thanks a million for joining us again. I think it's like our annual kind of check-in with you to see the kind of the state of the nation. This is like the state of the nation address, or the what's that Christmas message, you know, from George McGrath. Like
all that's missing is a crackling fireside.
There is an election in the offing, you know.
Yes, very true. Yeah, actually, there you go. George is an independent. That could be something we'll get into. Right, George, how has the 2024 season been for you?
Well, Dara, how is it best to describe it as somewhat of a curate's egg of a season? Good in parts. It was a very unusual season in terms of weather, right? So that was a very significant, I don't know how to put it, really weird weather. Very, very weird. In the early part of the season, there was high water up till around... The season starts here, as you know, on St. Patrick's Day. So for sort of that March, April, and into sort of mid-May, there was high water. And then all of a sudden, it dropped. And it stayed that way, continuously dropping for all the rest of the season. Now, that's highly unusual because normally you could get flood in May. And then you always had, without exception, every year up to now, you had the harvest flood. We call it harvest flood. You'd always get a flood in August. You'd be looking forward to it. And it happened every year without fail. But this season, the season past has been unusual in that respect, that the harvest flood never arrived. Neither did any flood in May. So we had low water continuously from sort of mid-May onwards.
And now, kind of the last one was kind of, wasn't it? The last day of the season nearly was when we kind of only got the last bit of flood, wasn't it?
I was waiting for rain and rain and rain. And they got more rain up along the west coast. They came up along Kerry, up through Clare. And let's face it, it's always pissing rain in Galway and Mayo and Sligo.
It's the way we like you to think it.
But it passed us by. We got no rain whatsoever. And we were crying out for it here for the river. But to go back to the early part of the season, the river was high and maintained a height. It's very strange, really. It maintained a height even without a lot of rain, if you understand what I'm saying. We had periodic little bursts of rain here and there, but it maintained a lot of height for quite a long time and then suddenly dropped. It doesn't make sense to me how it happened, but in any case, I go back to the start of the season. Normal fishing methods were out, kind of wet fly fishing or dry fly fishing, forget about it. So I went streamer fishing. Now,
and are you a new convert to streamer fishing, George?
You could say that. You could say that. In fact, I'm very fond of it now. I have to be honest about it. I did a bit of streamer fishing down through the years from time to time, just messing around. Basically, I might give a half an hour just messing, and I caught one or two trout here and there, but like never gave it any kind of real trial, if you know what I'm saying. But this year, I went at it, if you like, in a big way. I didn't have any alternative. Now, you could go lobbing if you wanted to in places here and there, but like that doesn't interest me, as you're probably well aware. But I started with the streamers. And, oh, man, I got really into it. Once I started to doing it correctly, and I figured out how to do it correctly, I got great results. In fact, the biggest trout I caught this season, I caught him on a streamer. He's on video. He's around 6 pound weight, like a serious fish. A real shore fish as well. He was really short and really deep, the sort of torpedo shape of the shore fish. They're kind of identifiable in that way. But anyway, I had fantastic fishing with the streamers. Now, I have to say, it's hard work. There's a lot of casting in it, and you have to work the streamer as well. For the most part, you're casting upstream or at a 45-degree angle upstream, if you like, and you're retrieving it quicker than the current. Now, that requires effort, particularly when the river's high because it's flowing quite fast. And but you get heart-stopping chases, you get really, really aggressive takes because and broadly speaking, you're catching bigger fish because the bigger fish seem to be more aggressive towards the streamer. Now, if you say went spinning with a spinner, right, you'd catch a few trout, and it's always worked. I haven't cast a spinner in 20 years or more, but you'd always catch a couple of trout. But whatever it is about the action of the streamer, now I'm using articulated streamers. So they're, if you like, they're hinged in the middle and there's two hooks. And they're quite long, like some of them are 3.5, 4 inches long. And I think it must be the movement of the streamer through the water that has the added attraction, if you like. But it's absolutely heart-stopping stuff when it's working correctly. It's really great now, I have to be honest about it.
Can I ask you, George?
Sure.
You said when you started, first off, you'd limited enough success. All right. Now, no doubt, no, there's been a lot of factors that have brought you onto having good success in it. But what was the key difference? What was the key thing you learned for streamer fishing that you could say, well, that was probably the most important thing?
The thing I learned was something that I knew already, if it makes sense to you.
They're always the best ones.
What I learned was like it's rivercraft. To be able to identify where a fish was likely to be. That was the key thing. Like now you can fish almost any part of the river, but it's much like upstream nymphing or fishing a dry fly blind. You're targeting the areas where we'll call it your rivercraft would tell you a fish is most likely to be. And that was, I think, the critical feature, if you like, that gave me, I had great success. Now I had particular days where I had fantastic fishing. Now, I'm no longer a spring chicken, as you're probably aware. So I had 4 hours casting like that, and I tell you one thing, you'll be a quiet boy. You'll be going home a quiet boy, I'll tell you that. If you're in your 20s, you'd probably do a bit more of it. But like it's hard work, but very, very gratifying and extremely satisfying.
So what are those features then, George?
It's common sense, if you like, in a lot of ways. When the river is higher, it's more difficult, obviously, to identify the features. They're not as obvious, but I know the river like the back of my hand, so I know where the features are in any condition. But like even, say, somebody coming onto the river who'd never fished it before and who was clued up in terms of rivercraft would be able to identify in under overhanging bushes, in front of, behind rocks, anywhere there might be a little shelf, any little pockets in a weir, for instance. They're the kind of areas you'd be targeting because, like, fish are much like people. They're lazy. they like to be in out of the current if it can be helped at all, and they'll choose. And as well as that, you have different types of lies, and then you have what are known as prime lies. They would be the areas. The best lie, say, in 100 yards of water, the best lie would be, let's say, for the sake of argument, in front of a big rock. That fish will almost, or that place will almost always be occupied by the biggest fish in the area because it's a prime lie. That's where he wants to be, and he's able to force the rest of the fish out. So you look for those areas and target those areas.
And did you find yourself you're walking more but casting less?
You do a lot of casting either way.
Right, okay.
There's a lot of casting involved because we'll just say, for example, you're fishing one behind a rock, for instance, right? You'd make 3 or 4 casts there anyway. And then just in case you'd cast to either side of the rock and then behind the rock as well.
Yeah.
But like there's quite a lot of casting involved and retrieving. So you're using your left hand a lot, retrieving the line, and it has to be of necessity faster than the current in order to give it the streamer the action required, you know. The action I've discovered a few things. Would you believe it? In the last fortnight, I think I've tied over 200 streamers, articulated streamers. I've been tying them most days. And I love tying them as well. They're fascinating. And I don't know, like going from tying size 16 and size 18 dry flies and then tying these big 4-inch long articulated streamers. I don't know, it's just like a new world for me, if you like. I've discovered a new, and like, you're never too old to learn new things, you know.
You've immersed yourself in the dark arts.
The dark. Yeah. I'm stooping lower and lower every season.
You're not far off nymphing now, George.
Here. Come on now, don't get me going.
Or for those of us who didn't understand earlier, lobbing.
Yeah.
Casey was wondering what George meant by lobbing. Yeah.
We'll be doing an episode next season on George has discovered the secrets of nymphing and lobbing and how brilliant it is and the amazing fish you can catch. I never knew it was there all along.
Never rule anything out. But anyway, look, just to go back to it, it was fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. I loved it. I can't wait for next season to get going at it again.
Brilliant.
That's
brilliant.
How enthusiastic I am about it. It's just kind of it's opened up a whole new world for me.
In fairness, Keith McDonald's been espousing this for the last few years.
Well, Keith and myself got together for a day back. I think it was in mid-April or thereabouts, and we had a good day. Now we caught a lot of fish. Now we didn't catch anything particularly big. I think the biggest was around 3 pounds or thereabouts. But we caught a lot of fish the same day. You know, the kit involved, right? Keith uses a sinking line, a full sinking line. Right now, that would obviously advantage you in higher water because you're getting down to where the fish are at.
Yeah.
More quickly, if you like. Whereas now the floating line worked just fine for me as well. But I felt that had I had a sinking line in particular circumstances, I would have caught more fish.
But were you using sinking tips or
poly tips?
Yeah.
No. I was just using a floating line. Just
straight through, line. Yeah.
Yeah, straight through. Use about 6 foot of leader, round about 12-pound break and strain, and then you just tie on your streamer onto it. That's it in a nutshell. It's not rocket science. The sinking line, Keith just fishes a full sinking line and a 4 or 5 foot leader again, and ties on each streamer. You know, I found that the floating line is easier to fish with in the sense that you're not having to pull it through the water as much. You're pulling it across the surface more so, but like a sinking line would definitely advantage you in higher water. You would catch fish, I think, but it's harder work.
Yeah, definitely. I've tried it with with the sinking, and it's a lot of pulling and
yes, it's hard work.
I gave it up.
Hard work.
I tried it with the floating line.
And you see, I always say I'm a bit heavy for light work, and I'm a bit light for heavy work. So.
And tell us, George, what size rods are you using?
I'm using 9 foot 6 weight.
Right.
So I got another rod as well. I have a 10 foot 6 weight. I just got a bargain on it and I bought it. So 6 weight is just fine, perfect for that. For the
right. You get away with the 5 weight though, wouldn't you?
You'd manage it, but you'd struggle a bit with some of the heavier, bigger streamers, you know.
Right,
but like 5 would be the very minimum now that you might get away with it. But again, it would make it hard work because you wouldn't be able to cast so much as you'd be kind of lobbying again, if you like, with a light line, you know, trying to overcome the lightness of the rod. But the 6 weight or maybe a 7 weight are perfect for stream fishing, you know.
Actually, just final question on that as well then, George. How do you decide, I'm most interested, what size of streamer you go for? Do you start with small and go bigger? Do you go start with big?
Well, I have been using more or less consistently the same size, and it has worked. Now I developed my own little streamers as well. Now there's nothing new in fly tying. I'm not inventing anything new in any real sense. I've just basically done a bit of research about it, the articulated streamers, and I've developed my own little kind of ideas around them. Like I said, it's probably been well done ever before I did it, but they're kind of I don't know if you've ever heard of a fellow called Kelly Gallup. He's an American. He's an aficionado. He's sort of the guru in America, if there is such a thing, for streamer fishing. And he developed these flies with unusual names like the Sex Dungeon, for instance. That caught my eye immediately. And he had some other kind of.
Okay, now can I just say for people going googling that,
just be careful.
Just be careful. Okay?
Don't be in work doing that one, I tell you.
So many of they're kind of based around that his tyings of the Sex Dungeon and a couple of other things as well. But I'm of the opinion, rightly or wrongly, I've had this theory anyway about all types of flies over the years, particularly nymphs or anything that goes under the water. I have this light dark theory. If something light is not working, put on something dark, or vice versa. And that generally, no, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it can make a difference. So I generally have just 2 colors. I have a black and I have a white. Now the white is my go-to. I like the white ones. They just, and they're very visual as well. You see, what I really like about this, particularly with the floating line, is when you're pulling the streamer through the water, you can actually see it, and sometimes you'll see them come after it and chase it, and it's really, really heart-stopping, particularly if they're big, because I would say about 50% of the time, now that's an approximation, the big fish will chase it out of his lie, and he'll turn and won't take it, right? But that in itself, like, they nearly stop your heart when you see the size.
Yeah.
After. So what they're doing essentially, I suppose, is they're hunting him out of the area. They're hunting him out of the lie, but they have no intention to kill. And then when you do get the one that takes it, I mean, like, oh, it's brilliant. Not short of brilliant. It's fantastic. If you watch that video of where I caught that fish, that particular fish I'm talking about, I caught him in a pocket in a kind of a little mini waterfall, little mini weir, if you like. I caught him in a pocket there, and that was some experience. It's one of the highlights of my fishing life, I would say.
Wow.
No.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, I'll put that link up in the show notes so people can.
Because it all just came together, if you like, for me, you know.
Yeah. So you started off well, brilliant streamer fishing, fish of lifetime, happy days. What could go wrong? Summer's here. The long evenings, the dry fly rod is out. Happy days.
Looking forward to it. And as you're well aware, I suppose, my dry fly is my thing. That's what I love more than anything. I would say this season in total, I might have caught 20 trout on dry fly. I would normally catch twice that many of an average evening, right? The river dropped, like I said, just kind of all of a sudden, it just dropped really, really low. It's sort of mid-May, sort of into late May, if you like. And where I fish, the weed growth, man, I have never seen anything like it as long. And I've complained about this before, but like, it turned into a forest in virtually a week. The bulrushes came up in the river. Now, the part of the river where I fish, well, call it my home waters, if you like. Okay, I fish the shore, sort of, there's 20 or more miles of it where I fish. But where I fish for the most part is what I consider my home waters, 5 minutes from my front door. I get into the car and within 5 minutes I can be casting a line. Between Ardmail Bridge and Mantle Hill. Now, obviously, a lot of people won't be familiar with that area, but that's where I would spend the vast majority of my time dry fly fishing in the evenings. Gone, finished, forget about it. Forget about it. You cannot fish that area of water beyond mid-May. You just cannot cast a line onto that section of water because of the level of weed growth, the bulrushes in particular. And what's really, really gone terribly bad, that's what you can see on the surface. But when you go subsurface and you see what we call the blanket weed, if you can imagine, if you stand into the river, in places it'll come up to your knee. So you have effectively 2 feet of blanket weed, of a blanket of weed covering the complete bed of the river. Now, I've been in danger a few times with this stuff. It can actually move in huge rafts, and it could actually it'll catch you and pull you around the place and could potentially pull you under. It's that bad.
How long is that stretch of water?
I'm only, this is approximate now, Darren, because I haven't measured it in feet, but I suggest the section of water I'm talking about is roughly speaking 2.5 to 3 miles. And that section of water is completely unfishable from late May onwards. Forget about it. Over, gone.
Now, we've had you on before talking about this, George, right? And I remember it was probably about 2 years ago, maybe, was it? And you were highlighting this as an issue.
Yes.
But has this gotten exponentially worse?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you go back to when I last spoke to you, I spoke to you, but there would have been little pockets here and there where you might have fished, as bad as it was. But now it's just completely and utterly, just forget about it. Go anywhere besides there. Now, if you go downstream, say, Darrell, where you might be fishing down further towards Care, or if you go further upstream, up, say, for Holy Cross, it's not as bad. And in fact, you'd say, what am I talking about? Like, unless you've seen what I'm talking about, it's hard to relate to it. It's just absolutely. And what I'm trying to figure out is this. Why is it that particular stretch?
Yeah.
All I can do is assume that the pollution in that part of the river is obviously worse. Now, that's what I'm thinking intuitively, if you like. I don't have any, we'll call it, hard evidence on that. All I can assume is that there's more pollution in that stretch of the river than there is above or below it.
Does the river slow down in that stretch?
To be honest about it, the nature of the river is much like the rest of the river. Now, there's a long stretches of what we call glides, but there are runs and glides, and that would be on all sections of the river, upstream or downstream of where I'm talking about. There isn't a particular difference in the nature of the river that I would be able to determine or be able to see, obviously, that's different from the rest of the river. All I can assume is that it's receiving more pollution than other parts of the river. Now, all the rivers in County Tipperary, according to the most recent reports, Tipperary is in fact the worst in the country in terms of the decline in water quality. Water quality has declined countrywide over the last few years. There's an accelerated version of it here in Tipperary.
George, I'll just give you so from the EPA report, this is from RTE.ie.
Yes.
This is back in June. So this is their annual water quality report. So water quality in 2023, an indicators report, said improvements are being seen in some rivers and lakes, but they're being offset by declines elsewhere. The biggest issue affecting quality is nutrient pollution from agriculture and wastewater. The report states that 27% of river sites and 35% of lakes have elevated phosphorus levels. And I'll just come down to the bit about the southeast. Yes, in terms of nitrates, nitrogen, we're seeing levels that are too high in the south and the southeast of the country, and that's as a result of more intensively farmed land there. And we're also seeing phosphorus levels that are too high, just over 25% of our rivers.
And the county council here locally, Tipperary County Council, right? This is what they're saying. In Tipperary, we have only 33% of our rivers at satisfactory condition, which is a significant decline from 61% 12 years ago. And again, it is worse than most of the rest of the country, which is on average 52% of water quality. So now the rest of the country has an average of 52% of water quality, which is an outright shame that they should be look at that as some form of quality, or that's a good news when the water here in Tipperary has only 33%. So the decline is worse here in Tipperary than in anywhere else. Tipperary suffered the highest rate of water quality decline nationally between 2016 and 2021. The well-documented deterioration of rivers and lakes was discussed at last week's meeting of Nenagh Municipal Council, at which councillors agreed that not enough has been done about the situation. What else could they do? You know what I mean? And apparently, just listen to this now. Over 6 out of every 10 farmers in Tipperary whose holdings were inspected by Tipperary County Council were non-compliant regarding water quality protection standards, according to a report presented to the members the September meeting of Nenagh Municipal District. And let me listen to this now. Just listen up to this one. Do you know what their suggested solution is, the councillors? This is their suggested solution, is that the farmers be given more notice of when the inspections are going to take place.
Did that come up in a council meeting, was it? Or?
That was at a council meeting. It was suggested that the farmers should be let know well in advance when the inspections are going to take place. Isn't that an absolute disgrace that these people can come up with that? But the important point here is that 60% of all inspections carried out were found to be non-compliant. Wow. That's the reality.
Let's go back to that number. 33% of rivers in Tipperary are, what's the phrase? Unsatisfactory. Is that what they say?
Yeah, they can use whatever terminology they like.
Satisfactory, I think.
Yeah.
So it's two out of three
are unsatisfactory.
Unsatisfactory, yeah.
Yes. So only 1 in 3 rivers has satisfactory quality. Now, can I ask you actually, George, you know, when they say satisfactory or unsatisfactory, are they talking like, what is the criteria for water quality? Does that mean it's not drinkable? It's not safe to? I'm just wondering, what does that actually?
Well, you see, it's very hard. You see, the terminology used, you see, is deliberately ambiguous, I would suggest, right? Because we have a crisis taking place here. And you see, the people that are responsible for this, if you take Irish Water, for instance, right, Uisce Éireann, who have received, since their foundation, 6 billion euros. I'm going to repeat that. 6 billion euros of the taxpayers' money to clean up the water in Ireland. I would ask, where did that money go? It certainly didn't go into cleaning up the water. That's for sure. Because we have a decline a continuous decline for the last 20 years. It's getting continuously worse year after year after year. And these people have got 6 billion euros. It's incredible to think that they got that amount of money and they didn't make any improvements in our water nationally.
I'm just again reading
no improvements whatsoever. Actually, quite the opposite.
Absolutely.
I'm just reading from the report here. They're saying we haven't seen any improvement to date on wastewater treatment. The EP said it's significant pressure on about 200 water bodies around the country, which is significant. The number has been coming down as a result of investment by Uisce Éireann and in our wastewater infrastructure, but it's still 200 water bodies is sizable and investment needs to be continued. I think you were saying as well, George, was it they were saying that it'll take another 20, 30 years or something for it to be up to standard, and the EPA...
Right, Uisce Éireann themselves have said that it'll take 40 years.
40.
Given everything going according to plan, it would take 40 years to bring the water levels back to what they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, they weren't great either. They were still in decline 20 years ago.
So in the 2060s, we'll have sufficient water quality that was reflective of the start of the century.
So the whole thing is a nonsense, you see. The whole thing is a nonsense, and there's been people being paid loads of money, 6 billion. Like, you can be certain sure that most of that money went in wages and administration and bureaucracy and other nonsense instead of doing what they ought to be doing. Well, it's typical of government bodies or anyone who's been paid by the state. It's the same carry on in every organisation, isn't it? Let's face it. That's the truth of the matter.
Well, what's heartbreaking as well is that, you know, when you see the fish kills that are going on, as we've covered on the show, and it's because of, in some cases, it's because of wastewater treatment.
That's right.
You know, that's not being treated properly, and cases have been taken against Uisce Éireann by IFI over that, and this seems to be an ongoing issue. And we seem to be kind of playing catch up, but we're not doing it fast enough, seems to be the case. The other issue then, George, then is particularly, and again from that EPA report, what you're seeing as well as intensive agricultural practice is one of the other key factors behind
that. Is the main contributor. Intensive agriculture is the principal contributor to water quality decline in this country overall, and particularly so here in South Tipperary, as outlined by what you just read there from the EPA there a while ago, because there's a correlation between the increase in the intensification of agriculture and the decline in water quality. The two go side by side. So when you have 60% of inspected farms being non-compliant, what else can you expect? And then the solution is to give them more notice so that they can avoid the inspections or cover up what they're doing. It's absolutely outrageous what's going on in this country. Like, it's a farce. The whole thing is a farce. Nobody is accountable for anything. Now, there's also another aspect of this, of course. The farming lobby, right? I'll just give you an instance, right? There was an ad on TV there going back a few months ago from the National Dairy Council. They were expounding and their credentials in terms of their environmental. They were saying that their environmental credentials were impeccable. That was the implication of the advert. They were forced to take the advert down off RTE because it was lies. The Advertising Standards Authority stepped in and said, take this ad down. You're telling loads of lies. That's
misleading, I think, would be the official term.
They would use misleading. Misleading and a lie are the same thing, right? Call it whatever you like. They were lying through their teeth on the national television, trying to give this impression about how clean they were environmentally. Everybody knows that intensive agriculture is detrimental, not only to the rivers, but to the environment in general. They're destroying the countryside. They're taking out, 5,000 kilometers of hedges and ditches every year. That's just one example. I mean, just to digress for a second, the 1st of November was there just a few days ago, right? I would normally have been out hunting and shooting and all. It's finished, gone, completely finished. Wildlife doesn't exist essentially around here anymore. There's no more room for wildlife on Irish farms. That's the reality. They can paint it whatever they like and put it whatever they like, any ads on the television. There's no more room for wildlife.
Give us an example there, George. Like when you, as going out shooting now, locally as you would have had 20 or 30 years ago?
Yeah,
What is it the lack of hedgerows, or what is it?
there is no habitat for wildlife anymore. That's it. It's gone. They have dug it all out. They brought in track machines, bulldozers, and all the rest of it, and taken out any wild areas. It's like if you look out, if you go up on a hill anywhere now in South Tipperary, look, it looks like Legoland, with the ditches all cut to about 4 foot tall. They're flat on the top and they're flat on both sides. It's like looking at Legoland. It's unbelievable. That's the few ditches that are left remaining. I'll give you one example. A local farm here where I used to hunt and shoot, okay, was taken over. There was 9 fields in that farm. They turned that 9 fields into 1 in 3 weeks. Like another example, right? Just to give you, to bring it down to kind of brass tacks. You drive along the average road here in South Tipperary and you can see for miles across the countryside on either side of you, because the road ditches have been cut down to that degree, right? There's machines out at the moment with big blades on them cutting the ditches all down, right? Now, owls, which are a threatened species, they're on the red list, right? Why are they on the red list? Because they fly at night, okay? And they hunt at night. If the ditch is 18 foot tall, which it would have been some years ago, he would fly out over the ditch and be quite safe. Now he flies out over the ditch, it's 4 foot tall, and he gets hit by the next car. Owls are being wiped out as a consequence of that. That's just one example.
This rewilding is happening in places more borderline of agricultural land, let's say the areas I'm in. But in areas where agricultural land can still make a lot of money, you know, I think
every square inch is being used, Tom.
The buck still rules.
Don't get me wrong, like the industrialization of what we're seeing, I'm not for it. But is it a sense of how the hell do we stop that? And can it be stopped?
Well,
because that's progress.
Well, you can call it progress if you like. But the big question is this, right? Do we continue on the current line and totally annihilate the environment in the name of progress? Or do we stop and say, here, listen, what is more important here? That farmers continue to do what they're doing, or that we stop now and try and reverse it, and that the farmers be incentivized to wild places as opposed to taming them, if you like filling in ponds. Like it's been done here. I used to do a circle here, right? Duck shooting. The 1st of September, I would take off out my front door here when I was a younger man, and I would walk in a circle. It'd be around 10 miles, I would say. And there would be dozens of ponds in that circle. Do you know how many of those ponds are left? 2. They filled them all in. Those ponds are there since time began. They filled them all in to make more room, to grow more grass, produce more milk, to get more money. You see, I would contend, and people might think I'm trying to demonize farmers. Far from it. I understand that farmers have to make a living. But unfortunately, government policy, EU policy, whoever is responsible, are forcing farmers down this road. And that's what needs to be handled.
But also, when you're going down the lowest cost pricing model, farmers are under more pressure because the artisan or the small time farmer can barely survive anymore. If you want to have any kind of full-time wage or any decent living from it, yes, you have to go bigger.
But we understand that the farming exists under, and for want of a better word, a capitalistic system, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the same. That's why the small shop doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly.
That's why we have Tesco's and Aldi. And also as well with dairying. I mean, at the end of the day, for a dairy farmer, profit is the key. And profit is what drives them on. And you know, now what I was saying earlier on, in the marginal land where I'm up here, yeah, you can bring in incentives for farmers. Like sheep farmers are the lowest rung of the ladder in earners in farming in Ireland. So there's, you know, they ring fence that and they put, well, there's certain benefits available where it's worth the sheep farmer as well, because there is a financial incentive, because he's not making a huge amount anyway. But within dairying, there's money. At the moment, there's money to be made. And it's like what you said there, George, they're pushing for the last little bit to get, where does it all get? Where does everything get? You know, where does it all lead to? It's a constant push. It's a constant push. It's getting 3 to 4 cuts silage.
Exactly.
You know, you're draining this idea of going for the 3 or 4 cuts of silage. I mean, that throws me entirely, because I grew up when, like, I remember just around here there was 1 cut of hay in the year.
Yeah, but think about the ground nesting birds, for instance.
Exactly. Yeah,
that's just one example, right? You cut silage in the middle of the night with big lights. I mean, it's crazy. Like, you see them out in the middle of the night cutting silage, right, with these big lights on the tractors. They got these mowing bars that reach out 20 yards either side of the tractor. What chance has any anything, an insect, a bird, anything. Is there any wonder that we have, what is it, something like a 90% drop in insect levels, 70% drop in birds, all this in the last 30 years? It correlates, you see, with the so-called progress in farming. It's not progress. I would contend that it's far from progress. It's actually regress. Because ultimately, if you continue to down this line, there'll be nothing left, including farming. Like birds can't even feed their young now. They're dying of starvation in the nest. They can't get insects to feed their young because of all the sprays and the chemicals that are being pumped out into the land. And subsequently, they all arrive into the water courses, into the rivers, and the whole thing is being destroyed.
How did somebody say? I saw somebody said it once. This is based on a ridiculous notion that you can enjoy limitless growth in a closed, finite system.
Absolutely.
In biology, such behavior of cells is called cancer.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
There's good quotes as well here. I wanted to just read. It's head of advocacy on Taoiseach, Elaine McGough. This is in relation to the EPA report. And I think she kind of has a good go. She says the fact that agricultural nitrogen pollution didn't improve in the south and southeast of the country should come as no surprise to anyone. Despite all the rhetoric about saving our nitrates derogation and turning the tide on water quality in Ireland, there is no evidence of the necessary improvement in our waters. She said farmers are jumping through several environmental hoops, but the measures they're being asked to put in place do not work for all pollutants and are largely inadequate for targeting nitrogen pollution. Until we fix that and put the right measures in place that we need, then we're only fooling ourselves if we think the water quality trends are going to dramatically improve.
But there you go. It's common sense. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's very simple. But then you have people, and I'm going to call them out. You have people who deliberately flout the laws. There are people who, for instance, and it was widely reported, it's public knowledge, I'm not revealing anything that hasn't been known up to now. People were crossing the border into the 6-county state to buy fertilizer to subvert they're only allowed to put X amount per acre out. But they wanted to contravene that, and they went up. They were lorry load after lorry load after lorry load of nitrates brought down from the north to circumvent the laws. It's an absolute outrage that somebody would have that little regard for the environment. But I mean, the EU are allowing Ireland to pollute. We have this derogation. Basically, what it means is you have a license to pollute. That's what it means.
But George, can I put it to you? Okay, your 2-mile stretch of water is, badly affected.
Yes.
I'm grand down here in Kerr.
Yeah. Let's all take that attitude, then nobody cares about anything. You know what I mean? Like, I don't give a shit about the river up in Galway, but I care as much about the river in Galway as I do about my own stretch of river, or any place that's been polluted, or any environmental damage. You can call me a tree hugger if you like. I don't care. The bottom line is this: our environment has been destroyed, and I'm calling it out. And that's all I can do.
Can I put it to you, George, that in the sense of we've so many rivers and waters here, right, that it hasn't got to the tipping point or dangerous point yet where big main stretches of rivers, tourist places, that are being affected, that are very visible, that your 2-mile stretch is, up out of the way. It's not, it's not where Fulch Ireland, whoever sends the tourists. So we're grand down here. Thanks very much, George. It's terrible about your situation, but it's not everywhere.
Right. So when it reaches you, then we'll say, well, let's forget about your little part now and let's move down to the Blackwater, because we can go fishing in the Blackwater. Let's forget about the shore, or vice versa. That is, I would contend to be just a disgusting attitude for anybody to take. And I'm not saying that you're playing devil's advocate here. I understand that you don't personally feel like that. I've no doubt there are people there who are like that, who don't give a shit about this, that, or the other, or care about the rivers. That's evident. It's clearly evident that there are people who have no regard whatsoever for the environment. All they care about is money. That's clearly evident. Everybody knows that. What we need to do is to get more people who care about the environment to take issue with it.
If I can just put it to you, though, the Greens got into power.
Yeah.
And they were pretty much a laughingstock, and their policies were risable to a sizable proportion of the population. And you will see that in the next election, I'm pretty sure, in terms of their percentage of the vote.
Yeah.
So when you have an environmental party that's pushing issues that the vast majority of the country says, would you get with the program and, get real?
Yeah, but you see, most people, as you rightly pointed out, are divorced from the reality of this. Most people pass over bridges every day. They have no idea about the river. They have no understanding of it. They don't care about it. It doesn't matter to them. It's not a significant. It's not a significance in any way in their lives. You see, on the other hand, I have virtually been married to the River Suir since I was a small child. I have a very strong feelings about this matter. I cannot reasonably expect everybody to feel the same, but all I'm doing is expressing my views and my opinions of the current situation. Now, if people want to get on board with me and highlight this, there's an election coming up, people will be calling to your door looking to be elected. I will be highlighting this to anybody who calls to my door and probably hunting a lot of them from the door because they don't even deserve consideration. All they're in it for is what they can get out of it. If anybody is willing to, I would urge people to just ask your local representatives to highlight it, make people aware of it. That's all I can do. Hence, I'm on here with you just to highlight the situation, to try to make people aware of it. I can't expect the fella that's driving over the bridge every morning going to work to have the same care for the river as I do. But maybe if he understood it a little more, maybe if he did understand the significance and the importance of the riverine environment. See, it's not just a few fish and a few insects or stuff. There's a whole host of animals and insects that are entirely dependent on the river for their existence. And once you destroy the river, what do you destroy next? Let's destroy that part of land over there. Sure, we can live over here and we'll destroy that part, but we can live over here. I mean, where do you go where you extrapolate that down the road? Mm-hmm. And like you're going to have rivers like they have in India.
Or just look at the UK across the water.
Yeah.
In terms of the pollution and that's going on there, and the sewage.
Look at Loch Ness in our own country.
Well, I was just going to bring that up, and that was the point I was going to bring up just there beforehand. There was parts of the river catchment of Loch Ness that would have had problems that were ignored because other people would have said, I'm all right in my area.
I'm all right,
and the tipping point has happened. Loch Ness became a green cesspool.
Yeah.
And that was the tipping point, but what would have happened before? But I want something you say there as well, and this is something we can't forget. You're married to the river. You're married to your river. Dara, I'm married to the lake. The amount of people that care for water and water quality in Ireland is probably small percentage. If you take anglers out of that percentage becomes even smaller.
Yes.
It really does. We're one of the few groups of individuals that
if
actually.
If it wasn't for anglers and people like me highlighting, imagine if they had free reign where nobody cared about the river.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
I think back to the Dodder and Ned Cusack and the Dodder Association, what the stuff that they did. And I remember Ken saying it, they were being accused of being Luddites. They were being threatened by the businesses that were, setting up industrial parks. They were, culverting and polluting the river. And that was big battles they had to face. This was when Dublin was expanding in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And they were seen as kind of standing in the way of progress. I'm one of those that's kind of like, you kind of shake your head and wonder, well, how can it change? Where does it end with the industrialization of farming? I don't know. And
that immediately made me think of what the forecast there that George gave, that it's going to take 40 years to get back to a position of 20 years ago. I actually find that depressing.
Yeah, and also
very depressing. Yeah.
But also, don't forget, in terms of the 40 years' time, in terms of the demand on housing, the government now is committing to now saying 50,000 houses a year. And we do, and see, I suppose this is the problem, George and Tom, is that yes, we're married and wedded to kind of local rivers and the environment, but when there's housing infrastructure needed, when there's severe pressures being put on water infrastructure, when there's no joined up thinking in the first place to try and help all this and develop it properly, it's inevitable that you're going to get these issues.
That's why I'm highlighting this, because you see, as you say, we need joined up thinking, right? We need the statutory authorities to coalesce and get together and formulate a plan where we can have development, where we can build 50,000 houses a year. But does that mean that we have to sacrifice the environment at the same time? It's not necessarily the case. You can build houses without destroying the local rivers. You can have adequate treatment plants, right? You can bring in regulations to control nitrates on farms, right? You can, now, obviously that requires change. It requires sacrifice. But like, what do you do if you don't do that? You continue down this road and destroy everything. That's the alternative. There is, like, it's a binary choice here. We continue down this road and destroy everything, or we stop and we say, hold on a minute, we need to do things differently. That's it in a nutshell.
It's very interesting what you said there, because you can equate that exactly to some of the programs we've had on here about salmon farming.
Yeah.
Because basically it comes down to the bottom line. We've discussed now at this stage that land-based salmon farms would solve a lot of the problems, and they can be done. So you can do it. But the reason it's not done, it's cost, it's money, it's profit. And what you just said there about those factors, George, it's the exact same reason. It's cost, it's profit.
Yeah. Money is the bottom line in all things. And you see, like, everybody needs a few quid to keep going. But like, I'm not just going to destroy my garden out there and turn it into a sewer so I can have a few more quid.
How much is enough, eh?
Yeah. Some people never have enough.
Will be interesting, and I suppose, you know, with the election coming up, it's something maybe for listeners of this podcast to, when politicians come knocking on the door, or have a look at the leaflets. What are they saying about, you know, local environment? And don't get me wrong, you know, housing is badly needed, infrastructure is badly needed, but where, like you said, where's the joined up thinking maybe to kind of the consideration of the environment in all this as well? It needs to go.
Anyway, let me tell you, to try and lighten the load a bit, let me tell you what I've been doing. Let me tell you what I've been doing to replace the trout fishing, if you like. What I did was I took up pike fishing with the fly rod. Now, as an alternative to dry fly fishing for trout, well, there's no competition really. Dry fly fishing for trout, as far as I'm concerned, is the be all and end all of fly fishing. That's just my view on it. But pike fishing is mighty crack.
But it was this during the summer, George, as well.
That's right.
So you went from dry fly fishing, replaced it altogether with pike fishing.
That's essentially what happened. Yes,
that is a hell of a jump,
isn't it? And I'll tell you how it happened. Right, I have a friend. You know him, Dara. You've had him on the program before. David Anshel.
David, yes.
Dahi, as I call him. Currently, I think he's in Bolivia catching some fucking thing with big teeth.
Yeah. He's on a boat in the Amazon somewhere, I think.
Yeah, but anyway, he said to me, George, he said, you've got to try pike fishing with the fly rod. He's on to me for years to do it. And I said, yeah, but David, sometime, and I kind of brushing him off. But eventually, he ran me one evening. He said, let's go pike fishing. I said, okay, we'll go. So I went with him, and he gave me, he has enough equipment. He gave me a rod and reel and line, and he had his own rod, reel and line. Jeez, I took to it like a duck to water. He wasn't there 5 minutes. And like, again, there's kind of parallels in a sense. I knew by the way he was fishing that he knew where the pike would be lying. And I know where a pike would lie. It's as plain as like anywhere out of the current, essentially, is where they'll be, because they are even lazier than trout. They'll avoid current at all costs. And they will be in little, if you have a little cut under a bank or somewhere, they'll be, and within 5 minutes, he caught a pike. I think he was about 8 or 9 pound weight, and it was mighty crack. And then I went on to catch 2 double-figure fish the same evening. I'm hooked ever since.
But I suppose it wasn't that much of a jump then from your streamer fishing experience.
No, they're much the same kind of a thing, except you're using bigger flies and obviously stronger and bigger equipment, if you like. I'm using a 9-foot rod, 9 weight. I'm using a floating line. I'm using about 4 feet of 30-pound nylon. And then you use bite wire or trace wire, whatever you want to call it. And then you have your pike fly. Now, pike, again, what I did was I made a bigger version of my trout streamer. So I made 6 and 7, 8 inches long white flies, effectively.
And articulated?
I have done articulated ones, but I found it wasn't really necessary. Pike, I think myself, now this is just my, and again, I'm no expert on pike fishing or pike for that matter. In fact, I'm quite ignorant about them. But what I do know is that they're voracious predators. And that if they're in the mood and they're hungry or whatever, they're feeling aggression or whatever, I believe you could throw a bean can across them and they'd attack it. That's just the kind of fish they are. Apparently, my limited research into them, the pike that you catch today is indistinguishable from a pike that you would have caught 60 million years ago. That their development, the development of them, their evolution, if you like, is at its nadir. It's as good as it gets in terms of a predator. and they haven't changed in 60 million years. Imagine that. So like you're catching a really primitive fish, and I've had mighty sport with them, and I've caught most of the fish I've actually caught have been double figure fish, typically 14, 15, 16 kind of pounds weight, and are they aggressive? Oh,
But in terms of the summer conditions, George, does it lend itself to it in terms of the water height and all?
well, again, like I said about the trout fishing, it's much easier to identify where they're at
Yeah.
in the lower water conditions. Very easy, in fact. You could actually go along and spot them and see them sometimes because you'd know where they'd be, This is a fascinating one, right? I'm down at a part of the river, it's very, very deep now. There was an old fella who used to fish with me many years ago. I think I mentioned him before to you, and he said, there's no bottom down there. He believed there was no bottom in the bed of the river. It was that deep. But anyway, I was down there and I'd caught a couple of pike. And I came back up to the car, which I had parked right on the bank of the river, and I had a lad with me. And I said, we'll just go up, walk up a bit, I said. And we walked up a bit, and it was a bright sunny day. And here was the pike. And I could see him quite plainly, lying in about 4 foot of water. And this was a real education for me. I had on my black streamer, right, the big black streamer. And I put it across him right in front of his nose about 4 or 5 times. And he kind of made a small little bit of a move, but he didn't. I changed it for the white one, and the second it hit the water, he had it. So that was an education for me, that switching the fly can make a big difference where a pike is concerned. But yeah, you can spot them and you can catch them that way as well. But they're relatively easy to figure out where they're at. Any inside bends on a river, they're going to be there for sure because they're in out of the currents. And oftentimes what I found as well, that they're there in groups or shoals or bunches or whatever you want to call it. Like myself and an old buddy of mine went down to one corner. We caught 5 there in less than 10 minutes. They seem to be all gathered in the same area,
You've kind of sold your soul quite a bit this season, George.
I have. I've sold out in a big way.
Do you not miss the old George?
Yeah, what happened to George?
He's a thing of the past now. Come on. Everyone has to evolve.
Well, the pike hasn't, according to you. So.
No, it's been brilliant. I mean, I like it's been a whole different season for me. Absolutely unbelievable.
And obviously you keep it going into the winter, George. Like,
yeah, because I actually went down the other day. Now I didn't catch one. I've been out maybe pike fishing probably 30 times, and I've only failed to catch one on 2 occasions. So I've caught them on every other occasion, sometimes multiples. I caught 7 one day. In 100 yards of water, I caught 7 of them. Now, funny enough, and again, like I said, I proclaim my ignorance. None of those fish were double figure fish. They were all what I call handy fish, 6, 7, 8 pounds weight. All of them in 100-yard stretch. All, as I was talking to a guy who knows a bit more than me, he said they're probably all young male fish. The females tend to be bigger. So, like, I'm learning about it, if you like. I'm trying to learn more about pike. Like I said, I don't understand a whole lot about them. But I tell you, when they come after the fly, oftentimes what's really good and really heart-stopping is you see, for instance, a gap in a weed bed on the far bank, and your educated guess if there's a pike anywhere, he's in there. And you throw over your big old fly in there. And after the first tug, you see this bow wave coming out. He comes out of the hole, if you like, after it. Jesus, they nearly stop your heart. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's like, did you ever see the film Jaws years ago?
You're going to need a bigger boat.
But when they come after it like that, it's just, I don't know, it's absolutely magic. And sometimes they don't always take, but 9 times out of 10 they're going to take. But oftentimes they'll follow it. Tell you a funny one. What got me into it really was with David Anshel encouraged me, but I was out guiding a fella trout fishing, and we were sitting on the bank of the river, and the fishing was brutal. And I said, well, try a streamer, I said, just for the crack, I said, and see for a trout, So I tied on the streamer anyway, and I had about 3 or 4 yards of line out, and we were sitting down, and I just lobbed the streamer into the river. The next thing, your man, he was sitting beside me, he said, look. And I said, what? And right behind the streamer was this pike, massive pike. 20 pound if he was an ounce. And he sat behind the streamer, literally a foot behind it. And it was one of the most menacing things I've ever seen. Now, I've trained a lot of dogs, including a lot of menacing dogs, German Shepherds and Rottweilers and stuff. This fella looked equally evil. I'm telling you, he stood behind it, and I kept it there. And then I just gave it a little tug forward, and he moved that little bit forward. And then I backed it back towards him and he backed away from it. And then I gave it a fast tug and he took it. Now I only had a 5-weight rod. He took off for the far bank and he bogged himself in a load of bulrushes, and that was the last I saw of him. It was fascinating to see him behind the streamer, the trout streamer, and how he took it. And that kind of, like the run across the river, when they run, I mean, a fish that big, now I've caught many salmon on fly over the years, and they're powerful fish, and you get a fresh salmon on a fly, it's fantastic. But you can turn a salmon. It's almost impossible to turn those big pike. When they're heading for the far bank, let's say, they'll always go for cover. They'll go for weed beds in under trees, that kind of thing. That's their nature. But if he's heading for bulrushes on the far bank, what I do is I let him run as far as the bulrushes and then turn on him, because he'll have burned at least some of the energy on the way across. But if you try to turn him if he tries to get into bulrushes near your feet, it's almost impossible to pull him out if he's any size. The power of them is unbelievable. They have a massive acceleration and huge power. They're the strongest fish I've ever caught in those terms, So they're a fascination for me now at the moment. And like Dara said, it can continue into the winter, you can fish.
But are you lost? Are you never going to go back to dry fly again?
Of course I am. Assuming that we can get, like, I can go down to your water and catch all the fish that you're trying to catch.
It's very exclusive, George. Don't let poachers onto the river down here.
Or I can go upstream. Like, I can go upstream as well, up from where I referred to earlier. It's just so sad to see the river decline to that degree. It's heartbreaking for me, And like, it's been the most unusual season I've ever had. I've been fishing for over 50 years. It's definitely the weirdest season in, like, everything was so predictable up to now. So you're never too old to learn new things,
But isn't that the brilliant thing, George? Like, if we were being talking to a year ago and said, in 12 months' time, you're going to be an aficionado of streamer fishing and pike fishing.
I would have said, go and cop yourself one.
Yeah. So maybe next year will be the lob?
I don't think so. But you never rule anything out.
You heard it here first. George says he's going to try nymphing next year. Maybe. George, listen, really appreciate it. I think the highlighting the issue for the river, I think it's really important. And I hope we can energize people in terms of kind of making themselves more aware of it. Yeah. And, educating themselves. And like, all we can do is keep highlighting it, isn't it? And just keep making people aware and just try and fight it where possible. Because like you said, I know it's playing devil's advocate. It's not on our doorstep, but maybe this is kind of the canary in the mine for you, like in terms of it could soon be at other people's doorsteps. So we need to keep on top of it. George, I'm going to keep an eye on your pike fishing for the rest of the year. I think there should be. Hopefully, I might try and get up to fish with you. You're
welcome, Dara. I've already invited you. Any day that you want to, just give me a shout and we'll go out for a pike. The same thing applies to you, Machara Hamash.
Well, basically, go him with she's off. To my force, go me don't she's like Rina Sauro. Well, no, on my trail and a black, and a gate don't she's.
Me may have better.
Me may have. Come with sin íana. Come with sin íana. Bhí sé sin gealta cúpla bliain ó hen agus ní bhfuair mé aon chance le síos with fós á. Agus le cúnú dé an blin seo hún.
Tága má agus túra mé dara in éon chuin.
Gur míle maith agat, George, and we'll speak to you soon, and hopefully I'll see you on the riverbank soon.
Tága má gur maith go í bhirt be mé caint ríis libh slán.
Our thanks to George McGrath for joining us on the show. Don't forget to rate, review and follow the Ireland on the Fly podcast on Apple, Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts from. Plus you can keep up to date on IrelandOnTheFly.com as well as on Instagram, and myself and Tom will be back with another episode about the people and places of fly fishing in Ireland.